Apologize to my brother or get out. My wife screamed at dinner, so I said one sentence that destroyed her family. This happened back in September, and my friend Evan suggested I put it here because, apparently, my life has become a cautionary tale about in-laws, toxic family dynamics, and what happens when you finally grow a spine after 7 years of being treated like garbage. My wife demanded that I apologize to her brother in front of 15 people at a family meal. Instead, I rose up, walked over to him while he sat there smirking as usual, and shouted one sentence that silenced the entire room. 3 weddings terminated 25 minutes later that night. Mine is included. Buckle up. This will be a long one. My name is Lucas. I'm 40 years old and work as an aeronautical engineer for a mid-sized corporation in California. Until that Saturday evening in September, I honestly thought I had a decent marriage. Not flawless by any means, but solid enough to build a life around. Solid enough to talk about having children someday. I imagined we'd grow old together. This demonstrates what I know, right? My wife Brooke and I have been together for 9 years. I was married 7 of those years. We lived in a nice suburban home in Riverside. Nothing out of the ordinary, but a lovely home in a good area with a 3-car garage and a backyard large enough for a dog. We had decent careers and no children yet, but we had been discussing starting that conversation more seriously. My annual salary at my engineering firm was around $155,000. Good money, a steady career, nothing fancy, but legitimate work that I actually enjoyed waking up to every day. There's something fulfilling about knowing that your work is really floating about in space right now, allowing individuals on opposite corners of the Earth to communicate with one another. My designs are up there. My calculations. My late nights, early mornings, and weekends are devoted running simulations. That material is important. Even if nobody at dinner parties wants to talk about satellite communication networks. Brooke earned approximately $82,000 while working in marketing for a boutique agency downtown. We were doing better together than most couples our age. We had savings. We had investments. We went on beautiful trips to destinations like Hawaii and Costa Rica. From the outside, we probably appeared to have everything worked out. The house, the careers, and the life goals. But if you've been married for a while, you know that what people see on the outside rarely matches what happens on the inside. In our situation, the problem was named Tyler. Brooke's older brother was 44 years old, tall, and had the Kendall good looks that made people assume he was successful before he even spoke. You know the type. Perfect hair, teeth, and handshake. The type of guy who enters into a room and instantly looks for the most important person to speak with. He owned a real estate development company that his father-in-law had practically gifted him. Tyler loved to position himself as a self-made guy, always discussing his vision, passion, and entrepreneurial spirit. But everyone who knew the truth realized he'd married for money and position. His wife, Sophia, came from a wealthy family with country club memberships dating back 4 generations and vacation homes in locations that most people only see on Instagram. Tyler had made it obvious from the start of my relationship with Brooke that he did not think I was suitable for his sister. I never mentioned it directly at first. Just a few comments here and there. You've heard of death by 1,000 cuts. Aerospace engineering, huh? That's consistent labor, I suppose. Or, Brooke, are you certain you don't want to date someone with a bit more ambition? Someone who is going places. Or, my personal favorite, it must be good to have a government-related job where you can simply clock in and out. Some of us are out here truly building something. Always delivered with a smug, condescending, punchable smirk. When he noticed my attitude shifting from polite tolerance to something darker, he always responded with, "Just kidding, man." But with time, the comments became sharper, more pointed, and more public. Brooke, instead of protecting me, would simply shrug it off as nothing. She'd remark, "That's just Tyler being Tyler," anytime I mentioned it. He means nothing by it. He is like that with everyone. Except he wasn't like that around everyone. He wasn't like that with Lauren's husband, Andrew, who became a partner at his legal firm. He didn't behave like that with any of his cousins who worked in finance or medicine. He was only like that with me, the aeronautical engineer who worked with his hands on complex problems rather than sprinkling money around and called it business. I should have spotted the writing on the wall many years ago. But I loved Brooke. Or thought I did. So I kept my lips quiet, my head down, and continued to attend family functions where I knew I'd be treated as the assistants. The supper that blew everything up was supposed to be a joyous event. Brooke's parents, Thomas and Margaret, were renewing their vows after 42 years together. 42 years. That's a lifetime of collaboration, compromise, and creating something together. They intended to commemorate it with a large family gathering at their home, a catered supper from a nice restaurant downtown, and a full production. Lauren, Brooke's younger sister, was present alongside her husband, Andrew, Tyler, and Sophia. Of course, they'd never miss an occasion to appear at a family gathering. Brooke's aunt and uncle drove from San Diego. The rest of the table was filled by a few cousins, for a total of 15 individuals, all dressed up in their nicest clothing and pretending to be one big, happy family with no dysfunction hidden beneath the surface. I knew it was going to be a terrible night when Tyler drove up in his brand new Tesla and immediately began bragging about how he had paid cash for it. Couldn't even fit all the cash in the briefcase, he remarked with a theatrical laugh as we stood in the driveway. Had to use 3 bags. But when you close a deal like I just closed, you treat yourself right. You know how it is. He stared right at me as he said that last sentence. You understand how it is. As if I'd ever know what it's like to pay cash for a nice car after closing a dubious real estate deal. I simply smiled and nodded. I had been doing the same thing for 7 years. Don't rock the boat. Don't cause a scene. Do not make Brooke feel ashamed by you. Keep the peace. Wasn't that always the mantra? Keep the peace. Swallow your pride. Avoid causing controversy. Allow the minor remark to pass, because responding would just make matters worse for everyone. 7 years of preserving the peace had led me nowhere, except to a dinner table where I was publicly humiliated while my wife studied her plate as if it held the mysteries of the cosmos. But I am getting ahead of myself. Dinner started off well enough. Margaret had excelled herself with her decorations. There are white roses and candles around. Soft music is playing from speakers hidden throughout the dining room. The table resembled something out of a magazine. She had evidently planned this for months. Thomas delivered a moving speech on 42 years of marriage, partnership and commitment, choosing to love someone even on difficult days, and creating something lasting. We each raised our glasses. Everyone got misty-eyed. It was quite gorgeous. For around 18 minutes, everything was picture perfect. Then came the main course, with Tyler's compulsive desire to be the focus of attention. So, Lucas. Tyler announced loudly enough for the entire table to hear. He chopped into his filet mignon as if he were doing surgery. Still working on those, what do you call them? Rocket parts. I felt the familiar constriction of my chest. Here we go again. Satellite components, I corrected quietly, my voice even. For communication satellites, such as those that allow people to make phone calls and access the internet from faraway locations. Right. Right. Tyler muttered, waving his fork dismissively. That sounds thrilling. This is really cutting-edge stuff. How's your pay these days? Still in the mid-6 figures. The table became quiet. Semper Fi 4. Mimi Ascension. Mimi Ascension. You could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Everyone understood exactly where this was headed. They had seen Tyler do this before. They had seen it happen at Christmas feasts, birthday parties, and 4th of July barbecues. Nobody ever mentioned anything. They simply let it happen. I'm all right, I replied simply, not taking the bait. Tyler repeated the phrase, letting it hang in the air as if it were something unpleasant. That is exactly what I am talking about, Brooke. Don't you ever want more than just fine? Don't you want amazing and exceptional? Don't you desire a husband who can provide the life you deserve? Brooke squirmed uneasily in her chair, and said nothing. She was scrutinizing her asparagus as if it contained the mysteries of the cosmos. Tyler's wife, Sophia, spoke quietly, grabbing for his arm. Maybe we should discuss something else. This is your parents' celebration. No, I'm just saying, Tyler began, warming up to his subject like a newly discovered star. Consider what I've been able to provide for Sophia. The mansion in the hills with the pool and the view, the automobiles, the twice-yearly vacations to Europe. That is what a guy should be able to offer his wife. Not just fine, not just adequate, not simply getting by. I felt my jaw tighten, but I maintained my voice level. Tyler, different individuals value things differently. Not everyone defines success based on the size of their home or the logo on their car. Of course not, Tyler answered, his arrogant smirk making me want to grab across the table. Some individuals evaluate it by their level of ambition, or, in your case, lack thereof. Tyler. Thomas, Brooke's father, finally spoke. His voice had an edge that I hadn't heard before. That is enough. This is intended to be a celebration. Tyler remarked, Dad, I'm just being honest. Raising his hands in mock innocence. Someone needs to tell him the truth. Lucas is a great person. Sure, I have never stated differently, but decent folks come last. Brooke deserves someone who will truly take care of her. Someone who is truly moving forward in life, rather than someone who is willing to coast around in a mediocre career while waiting for his pension to kick in. That word hit me like a punch in the chest. Middling. I'd worked my entire adult life to get to where I am now. I completed 4 years of undergraduate engineering at a state university while working part-time since my parents couldn't afford everything. 3 years of graduate school, living off ramen and hope while my classmates partied. At my first career, I worked countless 65-hour weeks to prove myself in an extremely competitive field where one mistake might potentially cost millions of dollars in equipment failure. I had 4 patents, actually. My work was practically orbiting the Earth right now, assisting individuals to communicate across countries. Last year, a satellite for which I designed critical components assisted in the coordination of disaster relief after a typhoon struck the Philippines. Real people, real effect, and genuine work that counts. And this trust fund baby, who'd never made a dime on his own and had been given everything he had by his wealthy father-in-law, was calling my career middling. Something changed inside me. Something that had been growing for 7 years had now reached a breaking point. "You know what, Tyler?" I said, carefully placing down my fork beside my plate. "I believe you have made your point pretty clear." "Have I? Though?" Tyler slumped back in his chair, enjoying himself greatly. He enjoyed having an audience. The entire table was watching now. Forks paused in midair, napkins grasped in tense hands. "Because from where I'm sitting, you don't appear to be getting it. My sister could have married anyone. She's beautiful, intelligent, and successful in her own way. And she chose you, someone who is just fine, sufficient, or average." "Tyler." "Stop it," Brooke warned. But her voice was faint and unsteady. She sounded embarrassed rather than outraged. And she didn't look at her brother. She looked at me as if I was the one making a scene. Tyler said, "I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. Sis. At family gatherings, when we discuss what everyone is up to, we discuss my most recent development endeavor. Andrew recently become a partner at his legal company. Even the cousins are doing intriguing things. And then we get to Lucas, and yep, he's still doing the satellite thing. Nothing new or thrilling, just the same old fine." I looked at my wife. I glanced directly at her, expecting her to defend me, to tell her brother he was out of line, to remind him that I was her husband and needed fundamental respect. She opened her mouth and then closed it. Her gaze slid to her plate. That was when I knew. That's when I finally realized what I'd been ignoring for years. I had lost her somewhere along the road. Maybe I never had her, and I was too busy working and striving to be enough to notice. "Actually, Tyler," I remarked, rising slowly from my chair. "I believe that everyone at this table should be aware of something." The room went completely silent. You might have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Tyler's smile grew. He practically glowed with eagerness. Thinking I was going to cause a scene that he could mock at every family event for the next decade. Lucas eventually lost it. He'd add, "You should have seen him. Completely fell apart." I took a slow, methodical stride around the table toward him. Everyone's gaze followed me. I continued, stopping next to his chair and staring down at him. "That your father-in-law has been funneling money from his pension fund investments into your projects, which is why you've been able to close all of those huge development deals. I know this since I manage aerospace contracts for the same pension fund. I've seen the documents. I've seen these shell companies." Tyler's face turned white, as if someone had pulled a plug and drained all the blood from him. Sophia's glass slid from her hand and landed on the table. Tyler said, "That's a lie," but his voice cracked on the word lie. He sounded like a scared kid, not the confident businessman he'd been pretending to be. "It's not," I simply said. "Your development company is technically profitable on paper, but only because you're getting loans at interest rates that don't exist in the real market. Loans backed by pension fund money that are supposed to be in secure investments for retirees, not prop up your commercial real estate venture. I've been documenting it for months, actually, trying to decide what to do about it, whether to report it, whether to tell Brooke first, but I believe you just made that decision for me." "Tyler, is what he's saying true?" Sophia was staring at her husband with pure horror. "Tyler, tell me it's not true. Tell me my father isn't involved. Tell me right now. Who cares how I get the money?" Tyler sputtered, his composure cracking completely. "The developments are successful, everyone makes money in the end, it's just creative financing. Business people do it all the time, except for retirees who rely on their pension fund to be there when they need it." I said, "Except for people whose life savings are being used as your personal bank. Except for the teachers, firefighters, and nurses who saved their money for 32 years believing it would be safe. And now it's paying your Tesla and your house in the hills." Brooke grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. "Lucas, what are you doing?" "What I should have done months ago," I answered, gazing at her honestly for the first time in years. Sophia screamed at Tyler, demanding to know what other lies he told her during their marriage. "Your brother has been calling me a failure for 7 years, calling my career mediocre, and mocking everything I've worked for. Throughout that time, he has been committing fraud, and you have been allowing him to tear me down. Was everything built on fraud? Was their entire life a lie?" Thomas was on his phone. Stepping into the hallway, presumably calling someone about the pension fund situation, his face had turned gray, and he looked like he'd aged 10 years and 15 minutes. Margaret was crying at the head of the table. The candles were still flickering, the roses were still perfect, but nobody cared anymore. Lauren and Andrew were trying to calm everyone down while simultaneously looking horrified by the revelation. Andrew caught my eye and gave me the slightest nod, almost imperceptible, but I noticed it. And Brooke? Brooke was staring at me like I was a complete stranger, as if she'd never seen me before in her life. "You humiliated my family," she said quietly, her voice shaking with barely contained rage. "Your brother humiliated me for years," I replied. "Every holiday, every birthday, every family dinner, you let him. This entire family let him. Every single one of you just sat there and watched." "That's not the same thing," Brooke said. "Tyler was just joking around. He didn't mean anything by it. You just destroyed his marriage, his reputation, everything he's worked for." "Everything he's worked for." I almost laughed. "He's never worked for anything in his life. He married money and then stole even more of it. That's not work, that's a crime." I looked at my wife, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't seen in 7 years. She wasn't upset because her brother was a fraud. She was upset because I exposed it because, in her mind, protecting the family image was more important than protecting her husband's dignity, more important than the truth, more important than the retirees whose savings were being stolen. "Apologize to Tyler," Brooke said, her voice rising now, her face flushed red. "Apologize right now for making those accusations in front of everyone." "They're not accusations," I said. "They're facts, documented facts, and I'm not apologizing for telling the truth." "Then get out." Brooke's voice cracked like a whip. "If you can't apologize to my brother, get out of my house right now." The room fell silent again, and everyone was staring at us, the aunts and uncles, the cousins, frozen in place like statues. "Your house?" I asked quietly. "The house we bought together?" "The house I've been paying the majority of the mortgage on for 7 years because your salary didn't quite cover your half." "Our house." Brooke corrected herself, "and I'm telling you to leave if you can't apologize." I looked around the table one more time, at Tyler, pale, and sweating. Sophia, mascara running down her face. Thomas, still on the phone in the hallway. Margaret, sobbing into her napkin, and all these people who'd watched Tyler tear me down for years and never said a word. My voice was calm and steady as I said, "I'll pack my things tomorrow, you can have the house, and I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce." I was angry at my wife, who was still choosing her brother over her husband, despite the fact that everything had just been revealed. Brooke's face paled. "Divorce? Lucas. Wait. I didn't mean." "Yes. You did," I interrupted. "You meant exactly what you said. You just didn't think I'd actually leave. You thought I'd apologize. You thought I'd cave like I always do, but I'm done caving." I walked out of that house and didn't look back. I drove to a hotel downtown, checked into a room on the 5th floor, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall for about 5 hours. Just staring, not thinking, not feeling. The next morning, I returned to the house while Brooke was at her parents' house, probably being consoled by everyone and told that I was the villain in this story. I had finally stood up for myself and refused to apologize for being disrespected, so 9 years had passed in 25 minutes. I packed my clothes into suitcases, gathered my personal belongings, grabbed my important documents from the filing cabinet in the office, and left everything else. The furniture we'd chosen together at that store in Costa Mesa, the decorations she'd chosen for each room, and the photos on the walls of vacations, holidays, and happy moments that seemed meaningless. I didn't want any of it. Each piece was a reminder of a life I'd been living incorrectly. That same week, I rented a small apartment across town, the kind of place that's functional but impersonal. Bare walls, basic furniture from a discount store, nothing that required any emotional investment, just a place to sleep, eat, and figure out what came next. It was exactly what I needed. No one asking where I was going, no one making passive-aggressive comments about my work schedule, no one sighing dramatically when I mentioned anything about satellites or engineering specs, just me, my thoughts, and the hum of the refrigerator. For the first time in years, I could breathe. The fallout from that dinner was nothing short of spectacular. Within a week, Sophia had filed for divorce from Tyler. Tyler had been actively siphoning money through a network of shell companies, hiding the trail behind layers of corporate paperwork that would have made an accountant's head spin. When the official investigation began, it uncovered years of systematic financial manipulation. Tyler's development company collapsed within a month, with projects abandoned in the middle of construction and investors scrambling to recover what they could. His father-in-law faced federal charges for his role in the scheme. Tyler looked nothing like the confident golden boy he'd always pretended to be, but rather a scared middle-aged man in a bad situation he'd created entirely on his own. The story made the local business news, then the regional news, and finally some national outlets picked it up because there's nothing the media likes more than a story about rich people being terrible. But here's what really stunned me. Around 3 weeks after I moved out, Andrew, Lauren's husband, contacted me out of nowhere and said, "Lucas, I need to tell you something. I'd wanted to tell someone for years, but I was too terrified of what it would do to the family, too afraid of being ostracized. Tyler has been manipulating everyone in this family for years, lying about his accomplishments, exaggerating his success, taking credit for other people's work, and mocking anyone who isn't impressed by him." "So, what's going on with you right now?" I asked. "I've seen him do it dozens of times, but every time I tried to say anything to Lauren, the family would close ranks around him, saying me I was jealous, that I didn't understand how business worked, and that I should be supportive rather than critical." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because you're the first person who ever actually stood up to him," Andrew said. "And I wanted you to know that not everyone in this family thought you were the problem. Some of us saw exactly what was going on, but we weren't brave enough to do anything about it. I should have said something years ago, and I'm sorry I didn't." That conversation stayed with me for weeks. It validated something I'd felt but couldn't prove, that I wasn't crazy, that what Tyler had been doing to me for years wasn't normal, and that I wasn't being oversensitive or making a big deal out of nothing. Someone else had seen it, but they'd been too afraid to say anything. It wasn't just about Tyler. It was about an entire family system that had enabled his behavior for decades, protected him, made excuses for him, and attacked anyone who questioned him. Brooke had been raised right in the middle of that system, and she had learned from a young age that protecting the family image was more important than telling the truth, more important than doing what was right. The divorce took 5 months to finalize, and Brooke tried to get everything, including the house, savings, and retirement accounts. Her lawyer argued that I destroyed her family and owed her compensation for the emotional damage. They even tried to claim that my revelation at the dinner constituted emotional abuse, as if telling the truth about a criminal was somehow equivalent to abuse. But I had a good lawyer, a really good one, who Andrew had recommended, and more importantly, I had documentation of everything. 7 years of mortgage payments showing I'd paid significantly more than half. Bank statements proving I'd covered the majority of our bills, while Brooke spent her discretionary income on clothes and trips with her girlfriends. Brooke had invested thousands of our joint savings in her brother's development company without telling me, and when everything was laid out in court, it became painfully clear that I had been carrying the financial burden of our marriage for years. Brooke and her family had been treating me like a convenient ATM who should be grateful for the privilege of being included in their gatherings. But we split everything 45 inches the end, which actually meant I walked away with more than half of what I'd originally contributed. The judge didn't buy the emotional abuse argument, but I didn't care about winning or getting more. I just wanted it to be over, to close that chapter and never look back. About 7 months after the divorce was finalized, I was at a grocery store on a Sunday afternoon, filling my cart with the simple meals of a single guy. I was in the produce section, examining avocados, when I heard someone say my name, Lucas. I turned around and almost didn't recognize the woman standing there. Margaret, Brooke's mother, looked like she'd aged a decade in 7 months, with grayer hair and new lines on her face. "Margaret," I asked, "how are you doing? Could we speak for a minute?" She asked quietly. "I know I don't have the right to ask, but can we?" We stood there in the produce section, surrounded by people picking out apples and arguing about whether the tomatoes were ripe enough. And Margaret told me something I'd never expected to hear. "You were right," she said. "About Tyler. About everything. Thomas and I had known there was something amiss for years. If not decades. We just didn't want to see it. We encouraged him to believe that he was unique, that rules did not apply to him in the same way they did to others, and that he deserved success just because of who he was. We let that belief ruin him. We let it destroy everything." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "You deserved better," Margaret said, her eyes welling up with tears. "From all of us, from this family, but especially from Brooke. She was so afraid of disappointing us, of not living up to what we expected, that she forgot how to be your partner. She forgot that marriage entails choosing your spouse over everyone else, including your family, especially if your family is wrong." "How is Brooke doing?" I asked, surprised by my own question. "Alone," Margaret simply replied. "She moved back in with us for a while after the divorce, but it didn't work because there were too many memories in that house." I felt a twinge of sadness for what could have been if we had been different people. "She is now living in a small apartment, working long hours, and not dating anyone. I believe she is trying to figure out who she is without us telling her who she should be. If she'd been willing to see me for who I really was rather than through her family's distorted lens, I'd have said, I hope she figures it out, and I truly meant it." "Lucas," Margaret said as I started to turn back to my shopping cart. "I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I'm sorry for what Tyler did to you, all those years. Tyler's trial began 3 months ago, after a pension fund investigation uncovered so much fraud that federal prosecutors threw the book at him. Tyler deserved a family that stood by him, and we all failed him." I nodded and walked away. Tyler's lawyers tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutors weren't interested because too many retirees had lost too much money. After determining Tyler was a flight risk, The judge denied bail, and he's been sitting in a federal holding facility waiting for his trial to conclude. The Mitchell family's golden boy, dressed in an orange jumpsuit and eating cafeteria food, is facing 11 to 14 years in prison if convicted on all counts. It turns out that all that talk about being a self-made man doesn't mean much when the feds start subpoenaing your shell company records. His father-in-law flipped on him almost immediately. Tyler accepted a plea bargain and was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison in exchange for testifying against him. He is already serving his sentence in a low-security facility in Arizona, and his family's 4-generation membership in a country club was revoked, along with the seizure of their vacation homes as part of asset forfeiture. Sophia filed for divorce within a week of the indictment, took the kids to Colorado, changed their last name back to her maiden name, and is now working legitimately as a real estate agent. My boss summoned me to his office about 4 months after the divorce was finalized, and I assumed it was about the Henderson satellite project. We'd been having problems with the thermal management systems, and I'd been working extra hours to fix them. I can't say I blame her for wanting to leave. Instead, he slides a folder across the desk. Senior systems engineer. He says. 18% raise. Your own team of 5. And first crack at the DoD contract we've been chasing for 3 years. I just stared at him. What changed? You did. He said. Over the last 7 months, you've been different, more confident, more willing to push back when something goes wrong, and more willing to take ownership. I was at a downtown Italian restaurant with Emily about 9 months after my divorce, and the encounter I'd been dreading happened. Whatever happened in your personal life has made you better at your job, so I'm giving you more work to do. The raise brought me up to $176,000. It wasn't cash money from Tesla, but real money earned by you. We'd been dating for about 4 months at the time, and we were talking about our students, my new project, and possibly taking a trip to San Diego for the long weekend, when I looked up and saw Brooke standing by the hostess stand. She froze like a deer in headlights. She looked different, thinner, and tired. The confident marketing executive who'd always been so put together now looked like she hadn't slept properly in months. She was alone, with no date or friends, just her in a nice dress that seemed to hang a little looser than it should. For a second, I thought she might come over, cause a scene, or try to talk. Instead, she just gazed at me, then at Emily, then back at me. I gave her a slight nod, and she turned around and went out of the restaurant. Emily saw the whole event. Ex-wife? She asked. Yeah, she looks terrible. Yeah. Emily reached across the table and held my hand. Good. I laughed. My chest tightened for the first time in nearly a year when Andrew called me again about a month ago. He and Lauren had separated, not because of anything dramatic, but because Lauren couldn't let go of what had happened. She blamed me for destroying her family, Andrew for not defending Tyler, and everyone except the person who was actually responsible. She continues claiming things would have gone back to normal if you simply kept your lips shut, Andrew said, as if the fraud would have stopped on its own, and those retirees would have magically gotten their money back. She can't understand that Tyler did this to himself. How are you holding up? I asked. It was better than I imagined. I've been keeping this family's secrets for 9 years, watching Tyler get away with everything while the rest of us simply smiled and nodded. It's exhausting to pretend you don't notice what's right in front of you. He paused. You know what the worst part is? I believe Lauren is aware of the reality deep down. Tyler was sentenced to 13 years in federal prison, plus restitution payments for the rest of his life, and the judge specifically mentioned his blatant disregard for working people's retirement savings. She just can't admit it because that would mean admitting her entire family was built on lies. He said. I knew exactly what he meant. The guy who used to brag about paying cash for Teslas is now standing in front of a height chart in an orange jumpsuit with a booking number under his chin. During the sentencing, she called it one of the most egregious cases of pension fraud she'd seen in 22 years on the bench, and the evening news showed his mugshot. I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good watching that segment. Emily and I were eating dinner when it came on, and she just raised her glass. The guy who called my career middling will now spend the next decade and a half learning what it's like when the government takes everything you have. To karma, she said. To karma. Thomas called me the day after the sentencing, the first time we'd spoken since the grocery store conversation with Margaret. I wanted you to hear it from me, he said, his voice sounding old and broken. He's going to prison. My son is going to prison. I didn't know what to say, so I just waited. You were right about everything, Thomas continued. We raised him to believe he was untouchable, and we made excuses every time he cut corners, telling ourselves it was just ambition, drive, Tyler being Tyler. He laughed bitterly, and it's funny how that phrase keeps coming back to haunt us. I'm sorry it turned out this way, I said, and strangely enough, I meant it. Not for Tyler, who deserved every day of his sentence, but for Thomas and Margaret, who had to watch their son be led away in handcuffs after enabling him for 42 years. Lucas, Thomas said before hanging up. For what it's worth, and I know it's not much, you were the best thing that ever happened to my daughter. She just didn't see it. Emily moved in with me 3 weeks ago, and we found a bigger place, a 2-bedroom apartment with a view of the mountains and enough space for her books and my project equipment. It's nothing fancy, Tyler would probably call it middling, but Emily actually cares about what I do. Last Tuesday, I came home stressed about a design flaw we discovered in the thermal coupling system. Most people's eyes would glaze over after 10 seconds of that conversation, but Emily sat with me for 2 hours, asking questions, assisting me in thinking through the problem, and genuinely trying to understand. She even sketched out a potential solution on the back of a napkin, which turned out to be pretty close to what we ultimately implemented. You know what I enjoy about your job? You're literally putting things in space that help people communicate, she added that night. That's way cooler than Tyler stealing from the elderly. Exactly. You build satellites. He built a prison term. I laughed so hard that I almost choked on my food. Tyler is in federal prison, beginning a 13-year sentence. His father-in-law is right behind him. Sophia is rebuilding her life in Colorado. Lauren and Andrew are separated, and Brooke is alone in a small apartment somewhere, probably still telling herself I'm the one who ruined everything. As for me, I have a promotion, a girlfriend who actually respects what I do, and an apartment that feels more like home than that house with Brooke. My satellite components are still orbiting the Earth, helping people communicate across continents, doing the work that Tyler called middling while he was busy committing federal crimes. The other day, I received an email from my old engineering professor, who wrote, "She said you're the reason she went into aerospace. You gave a talk at her high school career day 3 years ago, and it changed her life." I don't remember that talk, but apparently, while I was busy feeling like a failure because some trust fund fraud kept telling me I wasn't good enough, I was out there inspiring the next generation of engineers, which is funny how that works. If you loved this video, please subscribe to the channel so we can bring you more and better tales. Thank you.